actually just got back last night from Florida, where I was for. Now I'm one of those little old ladies in Florida with pink hair. My hairdresser kind of went a little overboard with the pink, so I'm rocking it. So I was in Florida for Hillel Conference, and it was a really inspiring conference. And but I got back late last night, and so I apologize for being rushing for today. This class, this semester, we're talking about, I think the title is Great Jewish Personalities, if I remember, it's on the, and I thought, in the past I've taught about great Jewish women, and I left out the men, because I feel like the women are often underrepresented.
Well, you completed volume 1.
Volume 1. But this time I thought I'd say personalities, so we would include men and women, and kind of go through studying some of the great people that have made up the Jewish story, whether it's through biblical, through the Bible, through out history, through modern times, and I thought we'd have fun with that. So today we're going to be talking about, you might think, I like to go in chronological order because that's just helps me to think out how I plan the course. But today, so we're starting with the Bible, and today we're going to be talking about Jacob. Now I thought hard about who to start with. Like, should I start with Abraham, or Noah? They came before Jacob. But in the end, I decided on Jacob. What do we know about Jacob? Anybody?
Actually, there was just a series of
Red 10.
two-part series.
So the Red Tent, that was based on Anita Diamond's book.
Yes.
It was on TV?
Yes.
I didn't know that. All right, so that is a fictional accounting of the story of Jacob's family told through the lens of his wives and daughter, Dinah. What do we know about Jacob, the man?
Excuse me, maybe.
He's the son of Isaac and Rivka, the son of Isaac and Rebecca. Anything else?
And he married Leah and Rachel.
Married Leah and Rachel.
And Rachel had 2 sons, and Leah had a whole bunch of boys, and then Dinah.
Yeah?
He favored Rachel, according to Anita Diamond.
It's in the Bible, it says that.
Oh, it says that?
He stole his brother's birthright, and later on in years when he met him, he was afraid that he was going to come back and destroy him and his tribe, so he set up a plan to encounter him and sent ahead all kinds of gifts for him to soften him up, and then they parted amicably. And he fought with, at one point, I'm not sure who he fought with, the angel of God or the spirit of Esau, and he won, and that's when his name became Israel instead
Right.
of Yaakov.
So all of these things that you've been telling me are part of the Midrash. If you remember from what if you've been in my classes before, we have the story, which comes directly from the Bible, from the Torah, and then we have the backstories, the interpretations, the stories that have been extrapolated by the rabbis over time to explain what happens in the stories, and that's called Midrash. So all the things that we've been talking about, some come directly from the Torah, and a lot of it comes from the Midrash. And in fact, you could even say that Anita Diamond's book, The Red Tent, is a modern Midrash on the story. So it's the backstories that people come up with to try to explain the text of the Bible, of the Torah, makes up Midrash. We're going to start first with what comes directly from the Torah. So Jacob was one of the 3 patriarchs, the 3 fathers of the Jewish people, who are thought of as the fathers of the Jewish people. They're Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And um, in Hebrew, Jacob's name is Yaakov. And Yaakov means holding on to the ankle. Holding on to the ankle. Yaakov was a twin. His brother Esau and he both were in the womb. And during Rebekah's pregnancy, she had a horrible pregnancy. She was always in a lot of pain. The babies moved a lot. It was a very difficult pregnancy. She was ill. And she prayed to God and she said, why, what is going on here, basically, with this pregnancy? It took her a while to conceive also. And God answered her, the Torah says, and said to her, you have in your womb two peoples who are going to be in conflict with each other throughout time. And from you, these two peoples will be born. God also told her at that time that the younger will inherit the birthright of the older. So this is when the babies were in vitro, and Rebecca had that had a prophetic experience with God, who shared that with her. When the babies were born, Esau came first. And the Bible tells us that Esau was hairy and ruddy, very red and covered with hair. And holding on to his ankle was Jacob. And Jacob was not hairy, he was smooth and, did not look physically like his brother. Paler. All babies are the hairy one was probably adorable too, but they were two very different people. They were two very different people. The Torah tells us that Esau was a man, an outdoorsman. He loved nature. He was a hunter. He loved nothing more than to be outside with his bow and arrow, shooting at animals. The Midrash teaches us he was a hunter supreme, very big, strong, outdoorsy type. Whereas Jacob was the quieter one. He liked to stay indoors. The Torah says he was a dweller of tents. It means he stayed inside with the women, probably. And the rabbis, the Midrash, say that's because he stayed inside to study. He stayed inside to study Torah all the time, whereas Esau was out, in the world, roughing it up. Jacob was inside studying the Torah. So it came to pass that Isaac's eyesight started to fail him, and he became blind. And when he became blind, he feared that the end of his life was approaching. In truth, he lived many, many more years, according to the Bible. But when he became blind, he started to feel, I don't know how much time I have left. I want to give my blessings to my sons. And he called in Esau, the oldest, the firstborn, who by rights, by all legal precedents and the norms of society of the time, he called in his firstborn to bestow upon him the blessing of the birthright of the firstborn. Now, what he did not know was that several months earlier, Esau had come in from the field ravenous, hungry after a day of hunting and marauding or whatever it was he was doing. And Jacob was inside cooking lentil stew. And Esau said to Jacob, I'm starving, give me some of that stew. And Jacob said to him, I will give you some, but only if you give me your birthright first. And Esau said, what do I care for my birthright? I'm dying of hunger as it is. I'm going to die right here from hunger. Fine, you want the birthright? Have it. So with that, there was an agreement, a contract, which Esau soon forgot, but Jacob did not forget. And Esau sold his birthright. It's famously said for a mess of pottage, which sounds horrible, like a mess of stew, but he sold his birthright for that. So when Isaac was feeling like it was time to give the blessing over, Rebekah heard him ask Esau to go out to the field, find venison, hunt a deer, and cook him savory food like he likes, like his best favorite meal. Esau, go cook it for me, bring it back, and then we're going to have a talk about the future. So Rebekah, who had heard this prophecy from God when she was pregnant, ran to get Jacob and said, no, this isn't going to happen. Your father's not going to give Esau his birthright blessing. You go out to the flock, pick me out 2 of the best goats, bring it here. I'm going to cook your dad's favorite food. Nobody knows how to cook it like me. He's going to love it. So Jacob did that. And he did it under a little bit of duress. He said, Mom, I don't know if this is right. And the Midrash says he waffled about it, and Rebekah was very firm and said, this is how it's supposed to be. Listen to your mother.
Okay, something that confuses me is if he sold him the birthright, why'd I have to go through all that? And obviously, to the father, that contract was had no meaning, right?
To the father, that would, who, the Torah doesn't tell us if the father knows about that agreement between the boys. But one would suspect that even if he did to the father, it would be like, you two have no authority to make, right, you have no right to do it, you have no authority, I'm the parent, I'm the father,
contract was meaningless.
to the father.
You said that Jacob was studying the Torah. What was it, 3 pages now? I mean, that's the beginning of.
That's a whole nother
How can
story.
he study the Torah?
That's a very good point, because people do pick up on that. How could it be said that many of these patriarchs and ancient biblical figures are said in the Torah to be studying the Torah before the Torah actually was given at Mount Sinai? However, of course, the rabbis have Kabbalistic reasons for it, that they were studying the oral Torah, that the Torah is a timeless text that has no beginning and no end, and there are certain things in the Bible we just have to take at face value. We all know that. You can't logically and scientifically parse out every single thing of the Bible, or it wouldn't be the Bible.
The Bible's symbolic.
Maybe. But anyway, it could, that's one explanation. Anyway, so back to our story. So Jacob says to his mother, all right, we can cook him his favorite food, but he's going to hear me and he's going to know I'm not Esau. He's not a dummy. He knows Esau's voice. And his mother says, don't worry. And then Jacob says, what if he reaches out to touch me and he's going to feel that I'm not hairy? I don't, so his mother says, don't worry. And she takes the skin of the goats that they just killed for the meal and put it on his hands and on his neck, so that when he goes into his father, and she also takes Esau's clothes that are hanging up in his tent while he's out hunting, and puts them on Jacob so that he will smell and feel like his brother as much as possible. So it's a deliberate deceit on Rebekah's part, and Jacob is complicit in deceiving Isaac about which son is receiving his birthright. And Isaac does doubt. When Jacob comes in, he says, you say you're Esau, but you sound a lot like Jacob. Come over here and let me feel you. And when he feels him, he feels the hairiness of the goat skin, and he smells Esau's clothing, and he believes, he's convinced that this is indeed Esau, and he gives Jacob the birthright. Well, and I just want to point out, this is the thing about the Bible. It's endless in its mysteries and its and directions that you could take it. We're talking about Isaac, the Isaac who was going to be sacrificed by his father, and who was in the end not sacrificed by his father, but deceived by his father as they're walking to the mountain for the sacrifice. And he said, where is the ram for sacrifice? His father says, God will provide. But in the end, God does provide a ram. So this is Isaac, and just interesting to point that out.
he gave the birthright to Jacob.
Yes.
He didn't give it to Jacob. He gave it to Esau, even though Jacob was standing in for him.
Yes.
Unknown. So the birthright, when he pronounced it, it was to Esau, not to Jacob.
No,
He did not name Esau when he made the blessing. He put his hands on Jacob, which in those days and still today is the way the blessing is imparted, with hands on your child. And it was when Esau came in right after that and said, "Here I am with the venison I killed for you," and the deceit was discovered by both of them. Both Isaac and Esau were crushed. They were very upset by the whole thing. Esau cried. Isaac said, "What can I do? I already gave the blessing of the firstborn to your brother." He did give Esau another blessing, that Esau would inherit, be the father of a great nation as well, but it wasn't quite the same as really the birthright of being the patriarch, the third patriarch of the Israelites, of the Jewish people. So when it all went down, Rebekah grabs Jacob and says, "You better run. Your father's really angry, your brother's really angry. Go to my brother's house, to my brother Laban, and stay there for a while until things cool down." So off goes Jacob to his uncle Laban's house. On the way, it takes a few days to get there. On the way, he stops to sleep, and when he lays down to sleep, he has a dream. Anybody know about that dream?
Angels are walking up and down the ladder.
Right. He has a dream of that on the spot where he is laying, he sees a ladder, and angels are walking both up the ladder and down the ladder. And what does he learn at that place?
He learns that he and his descendants will, God will give the land to them and it will be theirs forever. That's what God promised him at that
Right.
point.
So with that dream, God reiterates the promise that he made to Abraham. Let me see if I can find the quote. Okay. God reiterates the promise that he made to Abraham. So I'm going to read it to you a little bit. "And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he lighted upon the place and stayed there all night because the sun was set." Beersheba was where Isaac lived, where they were living. "And he took of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord your God, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie to you will I give, it to you and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and the south, and through you and your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and I will not leave you until I have done all that I have spoken of to you. And Jacob woke up out of his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So, when he had that dream of the ladder, it was a prophetic dream, and God reiterated his place, his birthright as being the third patriarch, that his descendants would be the ones who inherited the land and God's dominion, I guess, over earth, if that's how you want to say it. So,
Okay, so this was done by deceit, but isn't it really the mother's deceit because she knows what God told her. It's not really his deceit. I mean, he did it, but it was really
And you-
orchestrated by the mother.
It was orchestrated by Rebecca, and it makes you wonder, why didn't Rebecca have this conversation with her husband and say, Isaac, I had a prophetic dream about the twins, it's supposed to be Jacob who inherits the birthright, and, you know, I think that would be a very normal expectation, that the wife would talk to the husband about her prophetic, right? So, but it doesn't, but yes, it was Rebecca's deceit. And when Isaac asks her, where's Jacob, where is he off to, she says to him, Esau had married two Canaanite women. And she said to, the excuse that she gave to Isaac was, I can't stand these wives of Esau. I sent Jacob to my brother to go get a wife from the family, you know, from our family. So he wouldn't marry one of these Canaanite women. And when Esau heard that, he actually went out and he married one of the granddaughters of Ishmael. So he took a third wife who was from the family, one of the granddaughters of Ishmael. But anyway, we kind of get off on the side. So in that dream about the ladder, there's a lot of things that go on there. Why do you think there's angels going up as well as going down? Where are those angels going up coming from? Ideas?
Well, it's showing that he will ascend, which he does, but then he also descends. He ends up in prison and goes back and forth. So that's going to be the pattern that we see in his life. It happens twice that he ascends, becomes Prince of Egypt, and ends up in jail, and he's back and forth.
Well, it was his son that ascended and becomes the Prince of Egypt. But it's true, I mean, as Joseph's father, he does have a position of, you know, great esteem in Egypt.
Excuse
So
me,
that's one
there's a
answer.
phrase called Jacob's ladder. Is that what they're talking about in that dream?
It's named for that. You know, there's a place, there's a song, there's a dance company called Jacob's Pillow that performs at Tanglewood all the time. All of these biblical stories, there's lots of interpretations, lots of midrashic interpretations that come out of it. And people gain understanding and insight by thinking about those questions, like why were there angels on earth going up and angels from heaven coming down? Like, it's through these or pondering, why would the wife deceive the husband and not have this conversation beforehand? That's the beauty of the Bible, that it inspires this kind of thinking and this kind of deep looking into questions of humanity. That's why that's what the whole thing is, why it's a source of knowledge. And why it actually keeps its freshness throughout time. That we can sit and debate these things and understand, well, why wouldn't the wife talk to the husband? And why would the sons deceive the father? And why, to begin with, would God not let Jacob be born first? If he was supposed to be the birthright, why didn't God make it so that Jacob was born first? You know, that's the beautifulness and the wisdom that comes from Bible.
Was that why he was hanging on to the ankle?
That's what they say, he was hanging on.
You can't go yet, I have to go first. So is that why he grabbed on to
That's
the ankle?
certainly one of the explanations. So he moves on, and some of the rabbis say that dream is also Jacob's first really personal experience of the sacred and of God. That in that dream, Jacob really gets it, really forms a connection with God and understands that there is a God and that he is a part of God's plan. Because, that's a hard thing to get. Not all of us get that throughout life. We try the best we can, but we don't always feel that connection. Anyway, the rabbis say that's where Jacob first found his connection to God and had a personal experience with God. he goes on to Laban's house, and what does he find there? He finds Rachel, but he finds her because he first comes upon the well, and all the shepherds in the area are coming to, it's time to water the flocks. All the shepherds are coming, and there's a stone across the well, and Rachel comes, and he is smitten by her beauty, and he single-handedly lifts this big heavy rock, which the Midrash tells us required all the shepherds together to lift, but Jacob has the strength now to lift this rock and water Rachel's flocks, and he comes back with her to his uncle's house, and he asks for Rachel's hand, and Laban says, sure, you can marry my daughter, but you have to stay and work for me for 7 years. So, and now for those of you who just saw the red tent, we're getting into red tent territory. So 7 years he works for Laban. He does a good job. He's growing up. He's maturing. And then Rachel, he gets ready for his wedding night, and he marries. But much to his surprise, when he removes his wife's veil, it's not Rachel. It's Leah, the older sister.
So the marriage is based on deceit anyway.
The marriage is based on deceit. This whole story has a lot of deceptions coming across it. Yeah? And complicit in that deceit really is Rachel, because Rachel knows it's not going to be her standing under that chuppah. She knows it's her sister. She could have gotten word to Jacob, but the Midrash tells us that she did not want to embarrass her sister, and so she told her sister what to say, do, act, wear, maybe gave her some of her perfume, so that Jacob, as he deceived his father, would be deceived under the chuppah. And
She also couldn't go against her father.
she couldn't go against her father. And the Torah says that Rachel was beautiful and shapely and comely, and Leah is described as having weak eyes. What does that mean? She wore glasses.
Now, in the red tent, Leah is not as pretty as Rachel, which stays true to the story.
Yeah, the Midrash explains it that Leah was not as pretty as Rachel. However, that being said, their story, when you get into the red tent territory with Rachel and Leah and their conflicts with each other, that we could talk about for days, but we're going to focus on Jacob. So Jacob the deceiver, who tricked his father, then was deceived. And in fact, when he complains and says, what did you lied to me, this is Leah, it comes back at him. And Rachel actually says to him, well, you lied to your own father, so, what do you expect? And he ends up working another 7 years to marry Rachel. Some of the Midrashic literature says that Laban actually let him be married to Leah for 1 week. Then there was a second marriage. He married Rachel, but worked the 7 years in, post the wedding. And in that time, what happens? Leah is very fertile, and she brings forth all the sons. Rachel, meanwhile, is not able to conceive, and it's horrible for her, and she prays and prays, and to this day, Rachel is kind of the one, when women have a hard time conceiving, many Jewish women will go to Rachel's tomb and say prayers at Rachel's tomb in hopes that will help them to be able to conceive to this day. But eventually Rachel does have a child, but first, before she bears a child on her own, she gives Jacob her handmaiden, and through her handmaiden, there's a son. I'm going to confuse the names of the one is Zilpah and one is Bilhah, and I think it's Bilhah that was Rachel's handmaiden. So ultimately, Jacob ends up with a big family under Laban's roof. with lots of children, lots of wives, 2 wives and concubines. And he is a smart shepherd and a smart businessman. And he knows how to grow a healthy flock of sheep, goats, camels, all of the animals that they're breeding. And when it comes time for him to leave, he's done his time, wants to leave Laban's house. He goes to Laban and he says, I'm ready, how are we gonna work this out? And Laban says, what do you mean? They're my daughters, they're my grandchildren, you're my son-in-law, you stay here with me, what you have is really mine. And Jacob says, no, I've been working for this and I've been building this up. Well, let's figure out a deal. So the deal they figure is that Jacob will stay another 6 years. It's one way to keep your grandchildren close. Jacob will stay another 6 years, and the deal he makes with Laban is that any of the flock that are the dark, speckled, streaked, not as pretty sheep and goats, he will keep. And any of the ones that are, beautiful looking, pure white, they will be Laban's. And Laban likes this deal and agrees to it. So there was a thought in those, he does a very weird thing. Then Jacob does a weird thing. When you read it, it's weird. He goes and he gets sticks from the various trees around and he peels the bark off the sticks. And underneath the bark, it's all white, right? When you peel off the bark of a tree, it's white. And he puts those peeled rods of white branches and sticks near the feeding trough and the watering holes. And when the sheep and goats come, and by the watering troughs and the feeding is also where they mate, most typically, because that's where they're all hanging out, by the bar. Belly up to the bar to this day. But when they see the white rods, they breed white. I'm going to get this backward. They breed white sheep. There was a thought that what you see is what you will breed. And when he would not do that and kind of leave it mottled so that there would be partly strips, then the mottled animals would increase. And in so doing, he built himself a strong flock that was actually genetically superior to the pure white flock of Laban. Think about the weak eyes, not as comely. Who goes for that? You go for, the looks before the brains or whatever. Jacob also built himself a flock that was we all know when you mix bloodlines, it makes a stronger genetic stock. And he built himself a strong flock. Laban was fairly unaware of it because all he saw was his beautiful white goats and sheep, and he was happy with those. But ultimately, Jacob's flock reproduced better, produced more milk, produced more wool, all of it was a stronger economic investment. So, comes time to leave again, and again, Laban doesn't want him to leave. So Jacob decides he's going to take his family when his father-in-law is off doing the sheep shearing, because sheep shearing is a big thing. You take all your thousands of sheep, it takes a long time to get all the wool. He gathers up his family, leaves while his father-in-law's away. Of course, the father-in-law goes running after him when he gets wind of it, catches up with him, says, what are you doing? You're leaving. You didn't even give me a chance to kiss my daughters and my grandchildren goodbye. What's the matter with you? But in the interim, Laban has a dream in which God comes to him and says, don't bother with Jacob. Let him do his thing, basically. And so Laban tells Jacob, I'm only letting you go because God told me to, but really I don't think what you're doing is right. You're taking my family, my daughters and my grandchildren and my flocks away from me. And to boot, somebody in your group has stolen my idols. So, Jacob, who has no knowledge of anybody taking any idols, because he does not brook with idols, says, we didn't take your idols. You are welcome to search away for your idols. Where are the idols? Red 10 people.
The women have them.
Rachel, the women have them, Rachel has them, and when she hears her father is coming, she puts them in the camel, saddles, the bags that she keeps, and she sits on top of them in the tent, and she says, "Forgive me, Dad, I can't get up to kiss you because I have my period." And he's not going near her in the 10-foot pole under those circumstances. And she takes the idols, but ultimately the idols end up, Jacob, when he does discover the idols, he does end up burying them and destroying them. But that's just a little side story of how the women, ran away with the idols. Anyway.
There's more to see here than in Falcon.
Lots of, it's total soap opera, right? Family soap opera. So,
Why bury them?
I think burying was a way of returning it to, they were made of clay most likely, they're going to,
Well, in the story, they have him.
why did she take them? Because in Laban's household, they still worshipped idols. And that was her childhood religion. That's what she learned and what she knew, even though she was, of the house of Abraham, but not directly because Rebecca, came from Laban. They still retained, that folk religion of the idols, and it was very hard for women to give that up, and that is actually in ancient times, it's well documented and discussed.
Excuse me, there wasn't any problem in the bloodline of marrying relatives there?
That's the way they did it in those days.
That was before they became strict.
And also, they were distant cousins. I mean, Laban, well, not so distant. Laban was Rebecca's brother, so he married his first cousins.
Yeah, those are the people you hung around with, so you can go to the next town.
Today they have laws.
Wasn't that part of goddess worship?
Well, in certain.
It was part of goddess worship, and you could say that one of the reasons why Rachel took the idols is because of the goddess and the women's relationship with the idea of goddess, which had to do with fertility, and had to do with women's health issues and childbirth and childbearing. And when those things are deeply rooted, that's a hard thing to let go.
They made a big deal of it in the red tent, but I thought that I heard a rabbi give a lecture that Rachel took them because she was attached to her mother, and it was her mother's, religion that did it.
Well, that ties in with that midrash. What happened, it's what seems to have happened just historically on the side with the goddesses and women, is that eventually that became to be understood as the Shekhinah, which some of you who took my folklore class might remember, or the female aspect of God. And the idols were no more, but there was a melding, this idea of Shekhinah, which was feminine aspect of God with the masculine aspect of God, and it was represented by certain trees, if you all remember, Ashterot, which were holy branches, which were derived from Canaanite goddesses also. It's a fascinating topic, but we don't have time to do that. That's a university, that's a doctoral thesis, actually. Anyway, so he's going back home, and he's got his family, he's got his flocks, he's done well for himself, he's wealthy, he has his servants, and, a whole entire retinue. And he's worried, what's gonna happen when I go home? I've been away now, 7 and 6, 20 years. What's my brother Esau going to say? Is he still mad at me? How am I going to resolve this? So when he gets close, he's worried that he's going to be attacked, and he divides his group up into 2 camps, one on either side of the river, and he makes sure that his wives and his children, his most precious, are on the farther side. And he goes off the night, and he sets it up, before I get there, he sets it up with his servants to take 200 sheep and go ahead of him and present these 200 sheep to his brother Esau. And when Esau asks him, what is this, who's this from? Say, this is from this is a gift from your brother Jacob, and he is just behind me. And then after the 200 sheep come 200 goats, and after the goats come some camels and some donkeys, and he gives his brother quite a lavish gift of livestock and servants and things like that. And each time it's three waves of gifts, and each time he has the servant say, "This is from your brother Jacob. It's a gift from him, and he's right behind me." So he's softening up his brother in hopes that with the presents and the gifts, that when he does encounter Esau face to face, he'll be less likely to be killed on the spot. So the night before he's going to meet Esau, he separates his camps and he goes and he lays himself down to sleep, to meditate in solitude, and it's there that a man comes to him in the night and picks a fight with him physically and starts fighting with him. And Jacob fights and wrestles with this man, the Torah says it's a man, all night long. And it's a rough fight, but in the end, Jacob is on top, and he's prevailing over the man he's fighting with. And the man says to him, "Let me go." And Jacob says, "Let me go, the sun is coming." And the Midrash says that the angels, it was the angel Michael that he was fighting with. There's all different kinds of Midrashim about this particular story. The angel says, "Let Michael, you've got to go up. It's time to sing the morning prayers." And Jacob won't let him go. And Michael says, "You've got to let me go." And he says, "I'm not going to let you go until you give me a blessing." And the man he's fighting with says, "Why should I give you a blessing? You already have bested me in this fight." And Jacob says, "It doesn't matter, I still want a blessing." Because Jacob realizes that he's wrestling with God. And he does extract a blessing, again reiterating that Jacob will inherit the land, will inherit a people that will be the beacon to other peoples of the world. And he receives a touch on his hip, on his thigh, which ends up to be crippling, and the man disappears. And Jacob gets up from this encounter exhausted and crippled, limping, and it's said that touch crippled him for life, and that's why we have the rule of kashrut that you have to take out. There's a big vein that goes back there through the hip meat. But that's Jacob's second. Jacob realizes that that's his second direct encounter with God, with the sacred. And so through that, when he goes to approach his brother Esau, he is carrying with him an aura of humility that he did not possess before. And the rabbis say, the Midrash says, first Jacob has the dream about the ladder. Before he had that dream, would he have been a strong enough person to go to Laban to carry out what happened over those 20 years between the marriages and the children and the flocks and everything else? He was a person who was kind of, before that, portrayed to be, a mama's boy, quite honestly. But through his own encounters, his personal encounters with God, he was able to rise above that and transform himself into a stronger person. And when he meets Esau, they embrace, and to his surprise, Esau kisses him and says, come, we'll join forces, just stay with me. And they reconcile, but Jacob does not want to stay with Esau, and he makes the excuse, oh, my children are too small and tender, they're too young. His children, the oldest is 13 by this time. He says, we're not going to keep making the journey. You go on and we'll meet up in Seir. And Esau goes his way, and Jacob goes on to a place called Sukkot, and there at Sukkot he establishes his homestead. And we don't hear of Jacob and Esau meeting again. The rabbis say that what Jacob was talking about when he told Esau we'll meet up together in Seir was some future time at the end of days when there will be a real reconciling between the children of Ishmael and Esau, and between the children of Jacob of Israel. So, when Jacob wrestles with that angel, the angel changes his name. From Jacob, he says, your name is not going to be Jacob any longer, your name is going to be Israel, or Yisrael in Hebrew, which translates to mean he who wrestled with God. And it's from that encounter that that the children of Israel are called the children of Israel. And the land of Israel is called the land of Israel. From that encounter, when God, through his angel, actually changed Jacob's name to Israel. So, it's a profound story, which does go on. We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to pass this out while I'm talking, and I'm interested. So in those 5 minutes, I want to talk a little bit more about, I want to just finish up Jacob's story. Jacob is then, throughout the rest of the Bible, sometimes he's referred to as Jacob, sometimes he's referred to as Israel. It switches back and forth in the text.
I just have a quick question. Everybody keeps saying it, the rabbis say. Are they just continuously saying?
Yes, even to today,
So
the
they can
rabbis
change
are,
this interpretation right now.
interpretations are changed all the time, but they're not deleted. The ones before aren't deleted, they remain part of the thinking process. It's added on. That's what makes up Midrash and Talmud. Nope, nobody feels the latest thing is supposed to trump. It becomes a matter of discussion and discourse and papers written and books written about it. And in the early days, that made up the Talmud, all the rabbis' different opinions and interpretations.
Is there any more?
Now, there's all kinds of editions and books and things. It's an ongoing discussion. Yeah, it's flexible, which keeps it.
Is there any more?
So, Jacob has his sons, he's finally settled down, and there's more Peyton Place stuff going on in his family, because we have Joseph, right? In the meanwhile, we know that Rachel has Joseph, she also has Benjamin, and she dies giving birth to Benjamin. But Joseph was the apple of, in this next part of the chapter, Joseph is Rachel's only child at this point. He is the apple of Jacob's eye, and he's very smart, and he's a little spoiled, and he also keeps having prophetic dreams that he tells his family, I had this dream when, there were all these stars, and they all bowed, there was 11 stars, and they all bowed down to me. So his brothers say, you mean us 11 of your older brothers all bowed down to you? So they don't like him for his attitude, for his little snot attitude of a brother. And he goes out, and they also don't like him because Jacob gives him a present that he babies him, and he gives him a gift that none of them ever had, which is a very fancy, schmancy coat. It's like of many colors. The Torah says it's an embellished raiment. It's got all kinds of stuff on it. It's the latest teen fashion, I guess. And his brothers are mad at him. And as you know well the story, probably, they end up selling him into slavery. They deceive their father. Now, Jacob, the father deceiver, is deceived by his own sons by bringing him the coat which they've dipped in sheep's blood, saying, "Oh, we're so sorry, Dad. Joseph's gone." And as we know, in the end, they end up all in Egypt. So, even though God has promised Jacob the land, the birthright, in the end, they end up leaving the land that God promised and going to Egypt, where Joseph has, through the course of history, become a prince in Egypt, and staying in Egypt for so long that eventually the Israelites are enslaved by the Egyptians. So that's today's story. I want to leave you with these thoughts, though, because as we were talking about, Bible text, Torah text, is very multi-layered and has lots of different ways that you can look at it and think about it. So with Jacob, we have this theme of father-son relationship and father-brother relationship and sister-to-sister relationship, family relationships. And we learn a lot from that, from those stories about how to communicate, speak with, respect each other, expectations, family expectations. So that's the story of Jacob for today.
Are you gonna give us homework?
Well, I just gave you a handout, we didn't have time to do it in class, so.
Did you hear what he said? I should give his homework.
It's a small part. Anyway, this is about Jacob.
But who was, Dean's father, Joseph? Not no, Joseph was her brother. Jacob was her brother. No, Joseph was her brother. And his father was Jacob?
So what have you got to say about this? Hold on, let me get you. All right, we have Michael Sterling here. What did you think about the lecture there, Michael?
Excuse me, is this gonna be on TV?
On television.
When?
When would you like it?
I don't know. When?
Okay, no, it'll probably be on in 2 weeks. I'll let you know.
What channel?
I'll let you know in 2 weeks. It depends whether it's normally 35 or 79.
Thank you.
depending.
I have Verizon.
What time?
It's 35. Actually, it's on. My series goes on Friday from 10:30 to 11:30, which is not good here, right?
Yeah, I see that.
So you'd have to see it on Sundays. Sundays at 4:30.
What DVR?
Yeah.
I
That's
thought it
what-
was very good,
On
very
Time Warner
informative.
Cable is what number on Time Warner Cable?
Channel 79. Sundays 4:30.
The trouble is, you can't tape it because they put a whole bunch of crap together. They're crazy.
Yeah, I
Why
know,
don't they
but you
break
could
the damn
tape
thing
it.
up?
Yeah, I know. It's a 6-hour thing. That's the
Why
problem.
can't they break it up so you can tape what you want?
You're right. So you got to set it.
Can you talk to them?
You got to set it. You know, you got to actually physically be there at 4:30 and put on the tape.
Oh, and then take it off.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Oh, back here again. I thought the lesson was very, very informative, and I think she spoke with an easy conversation style, and I thought she was quite good.
Good.